Now is as good a time as any to make a discovery. From the sheer number of amazing finds made by archaeologists, scientists, researchers, and even the general public in recent times, it's clear that we're going through a boom period in terms of collecting knowledge and information. There have been hundreds of astonishing discoveries made recently, and we've put together some of the most fascinating examples for you in this video. NASA landed its Perseverance rover on Mars recently, but its predecessor, the Curiosity rover, is still operational. The Clever robot, which landed in 2012, routinely collects drill samples from the Martian surface, and it recently identified the building blocks of life. A sample obtained from the rock formation known as Cumberland has been found to contain organic chemicals. This doesn't necessarily confirm that life exists now on Mars or ever existed in the past, but it's the first time that organic material has ever been found on the surface of the red planet. For the scientifically minded among you, the primary chemical discovered is chlorobenzene. The rover uses its instrumentation to cook rock samples inside a tiny oven, and then analyzes the gases given off by the hot material. Other chemicals identified using the same process include dichlorobutane and dichloroethane. It's entirely possible that the organic material was created by living organisms, but so far the long-hoped-for absolute proof of this remains beyond our grasp. We still don't know whether there is or was life on Mars, but we're closer to finding that out now than we ever have been before. In 2013, the City Council of Gloucester, England decided that the men's prison in the city was too old and no longer fit for purpose. They shut it down and built a new one, and the old building was allowed to stand empty pending demolition. A few years later, archaeologists were invited to come in and find out whether there was anything under the prison worth preserving. It's a good job they were, because they found an entire medieval castle hiding under what was once a basketball court. The castle is thought to have been built somewhere close to the year 1100, not long after the Norman conquest of England, and during the reign of King Henry I. It remained standing until it was demolished in 1787. It was almost certainly destroyed to make way for the prison, and yet no historians of the time bothered to record that there was once a castle standing on the same piece of land. Although the upper portions of the castle were flattened during the demolition process, many of the original walls are still standing, and there are fine examples of medieval pottery still within the lower chambers. Some archaeologists have even compared the castle to the famous Tower of London, but that's probably a stretch. Archaeologist Luke Auld-Thomas of Tulane University, New Orleans, USA, always hoped that he'd find something interesting on his recent field trip to Guatemala. But even he never dreamed of finding a stunning Mayan monument. While digging at the already established archaeological site of El Ajiotl, they found the stone face of a king staring back at them from inside an ancient doorway. Luke believes it was placed there deliberately to give the impression of the king staring out at his visitors, perhaps to intimidate them. He and his team have dated the monument to the 5th century, which is known to have been a turbulent period for the Mayans. It's not long after the arrival of Teotihuacan warrior king Sayajcac in the area, who overthrew the existing ruling elite and established a new one. This unknown king probably followed in his footsteps. 2 hieroglyphs carved into panels on the stele show scenes of costuming and dancing, so the monument may even be a record of the king's coronation. Very little is known or understood about this period of Mayan history, so discoveries like this one are all the more valuable because of that. The question of what happened to the H.L. Hunley, one of the world's first military submarines, was a mystery for more than 150 years. It's not a mystery anymore. The vessel was invented and used by the Confederate side during the U.S. Civil War. When it successfully attacked the USS Housatonic on February 17, 1864, it became the first submarine in history to sink an enemy vessel. The ship and its crew would have received a hero's welcome when it returned to base, but it never did. It vanished while making its way home and wasn't seen again until its wreck was discovered in 1995. It was immediately apparent that the crew didn't get far. The wreck of the Hunley is just 1,000 feet away from the wreck of the Housatonic on the seabed. Finding out what caused it to sink took more than 2 decades, but we finally have an answer. It seems that when the torpedo that sank the Housatonic detonated at close range, the resulting shockwave reverberated through the Hunley with such force that nobody aboard it survived. Without a living crew to pilot it, the submarine would have sunk almost immediately. 8-year-old Neshama Spielman of Jerusalem recently decided that she'd like to spend her free time helping out with an archaeological project close to Temple Mount. It's known as the Temple Mount Sifting Project, and it's been going on since 2004. Thus far, it's involved more than 170,000 volunteers, but very few of them have found anything as significant as Neshama did on her first day. What she first mistook for a tiny piece of ancient pottery turned out to be something far more valuable, an ancient Egyptian amulet. The artifact is inscribed with hieroglyphs containing the name of the pharaoh Thutmose III, which allows archaeologists to date the object to somewhere between 1479 BCE and 1425 BCE. Neshama's artifact had been waiting to be found for more than 3,200 years. Jerusalem was controlled by the Egyptians at that point in history, thus explaining the presence of the artifact so far from its homeland. Thutmose liked to refer to himself as the conqueror of 1,000 cities, so amulets like this were probably tokens of his power and authority. Despite being the official national animal of Scotland, unicorns are mythical creatures, or at least that's what we've always been taught. It's not technically the case. The Elasmotherium sibiricum, also known as the Siberian unicorn, definitely existed in prehistoric times. In fact, it may even have walked among early humans, thus explaining the persistent belief in unicorns that continues to this day. Until very recently, it was thought that Siberian unicorns became extinct 200,000 years ago. Very recently, a new study published in the scientific journal Nature, Ecology, and Evolution confirmed that analysis of over 20 sets of Siberian unicorn remains proved that they survived in Eastern Europe and Western Asia for much longer than that. The species probably didn't become extinct until 39,000 years ago, which would have given early humans plenty of time to become familiar with them. The species was more closely related to the rhinoceros than the horse, so it may not have looked much like the type of unicorns so often seen in fiction, but it was a real living creature nonetheless. Discoveries of golden artifacts from the Bronze Age aren't necessarily uncommon in Denmark, but this enormous hoard of gold spirals found recently in Boeslanda is far from common. Archaeologists found more than 2,000 almost identical examples of the spirals buried in the ground together, and they have no idea why. One possibility is that they were decorative items and were once attached to clothes as accessories. After 3,000 years, all the material elements of the clothes have rotted away to nothing, but the gold spirals are still here. It's impossible to be sure about that theory, though, and even if it were proved to be true, it wouldn't explain why so many of them were buried in the same place. It's thought that gold was symbolic of the power of the sun, according to Danish customs at the time the spirals were made. That means the owner of this hoard was probably a member of the royal family, or, failing that, a high-ranking priest. The entire hoard is now exhibited to the public at a nearby museum, but the plaque that accompanies them confirms that their origin and significance is a mystery. Determining the difference between what's a stone tool and what's just a lump of stone isn't an easy job, and it takes a specialized archaeologist or scientist to do it. Even then, some of their peers will probably disagree. That's why this next discovery is so contentious. Archaeologists in the northwest of Kenya claim to have discovered the oldest set of stone tools in the world, and they say they're more than 3 million years old. That's long before the time of Homo sapiens and a full 700,000 years before the known existence of any stone tools anywhere else in the world. If these objects genuinely are stone tools, they predate the existence of any Homo species, be it Homo sapien, Homo erectus, or anything else. Not even the Neanderthals go back this far. The experts at the site believe they've found sharp-edged tools up to 6 inches long and flakes broken off nearby rocks that may have been used as primitive anvils. Dr. Allison Brooks of George Washington University is certain that the shape of the stones can't have been achieved by natural forces, and that her dating techniques are solid. The most likely candidate for the inventor or owner of the tools is a hominin from the Kenyanthropus genus, the remains of which were found roughly a mile away. We mentioned right at the start of this video that we may finally have found signs of life on Mars. But is it possible that we should be paying more attention to Venus? Perhaps so, because a new study posted in September 2020 suggests that there might be life on the scorched planet floating around in its poisonous clouds. The controversial new theory comes from the fact that a gas called phosphine has been detected in the planet's atmosphere. Phosphine is made of phosphorus and hydrogen, and is associated with life because microbes that produce it are often found inside living creatures. Penguins produce phosphine in their guts, as do many creatures that live in swamps. It's also possible to synthesize phosphine inside factories, but there are no such industrial facilities on Venus, or at least not any that we're aware of. There are no penguins on Venus either, so the presence of the gas in the atmosphere is a total mystery. There's so much sulfuric acid there that no form of life we're aware of could survive it. So if there is life in Venus, it must have entirely different biochemistry than anything we've ever encountered. It's a fascinating thought. In March 2020, British scientist Daniel Field of the University of Cambridge made what he described as the greatest discovery of his career in Belgium. He was looking for dinosaur fossils, but what he actually found is the oldest fossil of a modern bird ever discovered. This tiny bird, fossilized inside a piece of rock more than 66 million years ago, has been nicknamed the Wonder Chicken. It lived more than 1 million years before the asteroid impact that finished off the larger dinosaurs. The fossil would be considered astonishingly well preserved even if it were half its age, and includes almost the complete skull of the bird. A detailed analysis of the remains demonstrated that the Wonder Chicken shared common features with modern species of chicken and duck, suggesting that it's a common ancestor of both. In fact, it could be the last common ancestor of both species in the evolutionary chain. It's always been thought that modern birds evolved in the southern hemisphere, but the presence of this fossil in Europe might change that line of thinking. The name Wonder Chicken obviously isn't very scientific, so it's since been given the official name Asteriornis maastrichtensis. We've already touched on the topic of the American Civil War, which ended more than 150 years ago. The relics and wrecks of that war still occasionally turn up on the seabed around America's coast, though, and one of the more significant of those finds turned up very recently. This Civil War-era steamer was found using sonar technology off the north coast of Carolina in February 2021. The vessel is around 20 feet below the surface, not far from Oak Island, and based on the images that have been obtained so far, it seems to be well preserved. Based on its shape, it appears to be a blockade runner, and would have been used by the Confederate side of the conflict to smash through Union vessels in an attempt to reach Wilmington. This one obviously failed in that attempt. 3 blockade runners are thought to have been lost in the area, but the 225-foot length of this one means it's most likely to be the wreck of the Agnes E. Fry, which was actually built in Scotland in 1864 before sailing to America. It's highly unlikely that the wreck will be raised, but divers may visit it in the near future. Gazing up at the night sky in wonder has been a human preoccupation for as long as humans have existed. Every star that's visible to the naked eye has a name, but some of those names are misleading. What's often referred to as the demon star in the constellation of Perseus, for example, is actually not one star, but two. It's a binary star system known as Algol, which comes from the Arabic word for ghoul. As the stars orbit around each other, the light that reaches Earth brightens and dims. The effect is visible to the naked eye, and it appears that it's something that fascinated the ancient Egyptians. A reference to the star appears on the papyrus Cairo 86637 calendar, which was made around 3,200 years ago. Amazingly, this is a full 3,000 years before Algol was discovered by modern astronomers. It seems the demon star was central to the function of the entire calendar. The calendar measures time in periods equivalent to 2.85 days, the exact bright to dim cycle of Algol. Why they'd single out Algol to use as a marker rather than the much more obvious sun or moon is unknown, but it's possible they believed it to be a divine entity. How they noticed it so much earlier than anyone else is unknown. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!